When picking between the S90F and the S95F from Samsung, there's a couple of things that you have to consider with these OLED TVs. They're not all going to be created equally, and I'll explain what's going on with these differences in this video. If you haven't seen one of my comparisons before, I try to give you guys a good example of what's going on with the brightness differences between two TVs. I look at brightness because that is what the camera is going to be able to show you more than anything else. Now, you won't see me comment on color accuracy, but I will talk about color and color brightness and what I think of it personally. I also only use modes that are going to ship with the TV out of the box. So that means that once you get the TV home, you can get it looking exactly like this with no tweaks necessary. Alright, now let's get into some of the differences. The first thing that might stick out to you with these two TVs without even seeing them is going to be the price tag. You'll know that the S95F is the more expensive premium TV. It's in the premium TV price bracket, while the S90F is sitting in the mid-range OLED price bracket, priced very similarly, often the same, as the LG C5 OLED TV, and somewhere around the Bravia 8's price tag, and that's the Mark I Bravia 8. The main thing I want to do with this comparison is show you how the picture quality differs using HDR content. I'm also going to let you know how the TV does with SDR as well as gaming. Now, because these TVs are going to be different in price, I want to make sure that I'm very clear on the use cases in this video. So we'll be approaching this from that standpoint. I'm going to look at whether or not you're going to watch it in an accurate mode versus watching it in a less accurate mode, something that is going to exaggerate the color and the brightness of these TVs. Now, before we jump into this, I just want to be clear and let you know that I did buy both of these TVs myself, and if you guys want to help support future endeavors like this, please consider supporting the channel by buying your next TV through one of my affiliate links in the description below. Thank you guys so much for your support. So let's jump right into it and talk about the picture quality between these two TVs. They are very similar. I have to say that just watching them in a dark room, straight up, I can barely tell them apart in a majority of content that is considered regular viewing content, and that's like HDR movies, HDR TV shows. That is what I personally watch on a daily basis. I also took a look at the SDR as well. And when I'm looking at these, when I'm saying they're very similar, I'm talking about if you're using the more accurate modes. And we'll touch on that a little bit later, but this is using filmmaker mode for a lot of my examples. Now, I know there's a lot of people that don't watch it in filmmaker mode, so like I said, I will touch on the other modes in just a second. But starting off with filmmaker mode, I did notice some differences within demo content, which is the content that you're seeing playing right now. You will see some differences here, but those differences will be a little bit subtle for most people. But with movies and TV shows, it was kind of a different story. Unless there is a really high graded HDR movie, there were really no differences with the TVs when compared to each other. This is a little bit different than last year where the S90D and the S95D had more separation points. I think the S95D separated from the S90D quite a bit more than what we're seeing here. That's a good thing for people looking at the S90F. And I do think that the S90F is really a great TV. It punches at flagship levels. On paper, the S90F is looking very impressive. There's people that are getting brightness figures very close to the S95D of last year. But the S95F has gotten a boost as well, as we're seeing it in the 2200 nit range, which is really impressive for an OLED TV. And I have to stress, that's just in the accurate modes. But the regular content we're talking about here, you don't really see those brightness differences. But that's not to say that you absolutely can't, because you can. The S95F has a secret weapon. So with the S95F, it does do something special when it comes down to full screen brightness or close to full screen brightness. It really just comes alive, where I don't see that same thing happening with the S90F. And I do kind of have to emphasize that because you will notice that even in regular content sometimes. It's really, really impressive. That's definitely one of the separation points between the S90F and the S95F. But when it comes down to the other separation points with the S90F and the S95F, it usually comes within the higher graded content, like I said, but also sometimes with color as well. You'll see that the color brightness on the S95F can often exceed the S90F's capabilities. Now, are you going to see this in most content? I really don't think so. You really have to be throwing 1,000 nits or more at this to start to see a difference. But to be real with you, there's not a magic number here, and it really is going to be varying from scene to scene whether or not I see a difference in the S95F and the S90F. Throwing some of Jennifer Gala's content on there where it was graded at like 4,000 nits, there was absolutely a difference in the color brightness. Just take a look at these high luminance fries. Now that's not a sentence I thought I'd ever mutter, but you could definitely tell a difference. You can also see it here in a scene where a colorful light is present. In fact, there's a lot of examples on her channel where I do see differences with the S95F being better than the S90F, but she edits her videos to be displayed on these TVs to take full advantage of the TV's capabilities so that we can see differences like this. But I want to stress, this is not what you're going to see in most content. That is, if you are going to be watching in something like filmmaker mode, because the moment you switch it into something like movie mode with the active tone mapping, or if you switch it into something like standard or dynamic, well then you're going to push the TV even further, and then they do separate. So if you are somebody who just likes to put their TV in standard or dynamic, or even if you're somebody who just watches in the movie mode with the active tone mapping, then the brighter TV, the S95F, may be more beneficial to you. You may see that difference. It may be a nice shock and awe for you, especially if you're somebody who upgrades your TV a lot and you just want to see any kind of difference. Well, those modes will do it for you. So perhaps you're a Vivid Viper or a Dynamic Dinosaur, somebody who uses dynamic mode or standard mode all the time. Well, then you're going to really like the S95F because it gets up to 4,000 nits. A lot of those same people like to really push the SDR modes as well. While a good chunk of people will adjust their TV based on the room brightness, which I do highly recommend, but I know there are a ton of people that actually do push SDR to their maximum and go 50 brightness, 50 contrast, and just max it out. Not highly recommended, by the way, but some people do like that. And when you do that, you will see the S95F is quite the capable TV, and it will be more capable than the S90F when you see them side by side, like in this example here. A lot of people might like that for sports, for example, and I did compare it with sports, as you can see here. I blurred out the screen so I don't get hit with copyright, but you can see the brightness differences. There's no doubt about it, there is differences between the S95F and the S90F in brightness if you are going to push the TVs. But if we're keeping it in the filmmaker mode, kind of following the creator's intent, like a lot of people do when they're watching movies and TV shows, then you will notice that there's few differences with these two TVs. Unless, of course, you have highly graded content that will push the limits of the S95F. If you watch a lot of movies, TV shows, streaming services, and you see that most of this content that you're watching isn't really going to separate. I tested out a lot of different stuff, and you have your occasional movies where those highlights are going to look a lot better on the S95F, and you'll have the HDR impact that just wins on the S95F. But if you didn't have it next to the S90F, you wouldn't really know that it's that much brighter than the S90F, if that makes sense. So I do want to tell you guys that the S90F is not too far off of the S95F. And that is why I have to stress that if you're going to be looking at the S95F or the LG G5, you should do yourself a favor and also consider the S90F if you're somebody who's watching in these more accurate modes like filmmaker mode, unless of course you want everything that goes along with the S95F, like the screen coating and the One Connect box. It is something that you have to consider whether or not you want those things. And I really do want to point that out when it comes down to the differences between the two TVs. I did test out how the glare-free coating does in certain situations. Not really a perfect test of what's going on here, but you can get an idea of what's going on with the screen coating, what it does with lights, and if it's going to be right for you. Now, what I didn't do is a bright room test. I didn't have the ability to show you how it looks with the blinds open, and that is something that I might have to revisit in a video very soon, so maybe stay tuned to the channel for that. Now, I know there's news of people taking off their screen coating of the S95F, peeling it away, chipping away at it. I don't highly recommend that, by the way. If you want a glossy coating, just get the S90F. It's not that far off of the S95F. And there's also other premium OLED TV options out there. A question I often get about the screen coating is there any difference in a dark room? Is there even a difference in clarity with these two TVs? And the answer is no. They're using the same processor, so they have that going for it. And when it comes down to picture clarity, they're dead even. Another difference that I didn't talk about yet was going to be the sound quality. And this is just going to be brief, but I do think that the S95F has better sound quality overall than the S90F. There's better dialogue here with the S95F, and it does seem like it's an improvement over previous S95 series TVs. So I do think that they made an upgrade here with the S95F speakers. But the S90F reminds me of last year's S90D speakers, so they're along the same lines as that. I do think the S95F overall is a better system. As far as the motion handling goes, since they are using the same processor, it looks like they are performing exactly the same when it comes down to motion. I'm not going to get into whether or not you're going to like the motion since I'm comparing these two TVs. Now let's talk about game mode. So a big difference with the game mode of the S95F compared to the S90F is the ability to do 165 Hz when PC gaming, where on the S90F you can only do 144 Hz. So if you're a PC gamer that wants to push your frames, then that's something to consider. Due to the way that HDR works on these TVs, it's going to be hard to show you a fair example without making the S90F clip. So if you ever see the S90F and it looks like it's blowing out the highlights on game footage, that is why. When it comes down to the picture quality here, you are going to notice a difference with the color and brightness, but like movies and TV shows, it's really going to be game dependent. But there's definitely more examples with games in mind because you're targeting a certain brightness point and you're usually targeting your TV's brightness, and you will see differences just based off of that alone. And I did see differences, and I think that the S95F shows that it's more capable than the S90F when you are comparing them side by side, but there is also going to be examples where they look fairly similar for the most part. And this is specifically in HDR gaming. With SDR gaming, of course, the more capable TV usually shines, and this is the case with the S95F as well. You will see that the S95F looks significantly brighter than the S90F at times with certain SDR games. So all in all, which one should you get? I think the majority of buyers should probably look towards the S90F. It really feels like the S90F hits the sweet spot this year, and it feels like it's the best bang for your buck once again, where we are going to talk about a capable TV that performs like a flagship TV, and in a lot of content, it looks similar to the flagship TV. But of course, if you want the extra ability, the One Connect box, and the glare-free coating, the S95F is a really solid TV. It's not going to fit everybody, but I do think that it still is a flagship premium TV that really does deliver the shock and awe that you're looking for from a flagship TV. It is a step up from the S95D, and it does feel like a next generation QD-OLED. But I'd love to hear which one you would get. Tell me in the comment section below. And if you want to keep watching content just like this, I have side-by-side comparisons right here. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you in the next one.